welcome back to the Marine Corps Association podcast. I'm Nick. I'm here with Vic.
Hello.
And William.
Hello, everyone.
And today we have a pretty good interview for you with...
Pretty good, man.
Pretty good.
This one, I got to say, man, I was floored. I was really just listening to it, even though I was interviewing. I mean, anyway, I don't mean to cut you off, man, but yeah, Tom Schueman, Marine Corps Infantry Major.
And... yes. So the first thing, okay, this is a little bit of a spoiler alert for the very, very beginning of the interview. Major Tom Schueman plays a little bit of Two Truths and a Lie with Vic.
Yeah.
He introduces himself as an infantry marine and a dad, and as the most uninteresting marine in the history of the Marine Corps, or something
Two of
similar
those
to
things
that.
are true. One of them is totally false.
And he is an infantry marine, and he is a dad. However, he is not the most boring marine in the history of the Marine Corps.
By far.
Like, just straight up, he's got war stories for days, and they don't even feel like sea stories. They're
I hate to even call them war stories.
Yeah.
That sounds so not what he's doing here. He's really just telling his story that happened to be in just one of the most tumultuous places on Earth in 2009.
And in a
2010.
very, like 100-plus firefights, I guess, is...
I mean, I think in his interview, he mentioned, 35 members of his platoon, and 19 of them were casualties.
Yeah.
Himself included, which he talks about that.
Yeah, and it's all downplayed. Like, it's not...
humble.
Yeah.
I mean, that was another thing that came through, not just the authenticity of his account, but his humility. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who embraces, I think, the ethos of Marine Corps leadership. Me having been retired now for a few years, I was like, it's kind of easy for me to like, hey, young Marine, but
hey, young buck.
Hey, good on, there, devil dog.
There.
But like, I found myself sort of like, I'd follow this guy, like,
especially because like half the time he talks is just he's telling other people's stories as well, and putting not saying like putting them on a pedestal, but emphasizing like their role and like in his overall story.
That's such a good point.
Downplays himself and uplifts everyone around him. Yeah, for sure. I think he said he was surrounded by a lot of real tough dudes.
Real tough dudes in a really tough situation, obviously.
Like,
and as you'll hear in the interview, like, not the best. We as the Marine Corps did not do them a lot of justice in preparing them. We had them going for a completely different kind of mission. Yeah,
and for a different mission, and then mission changing, like, in action.
Right.
He touches on some WikiLeaks stuff that might have been going on, and it's
just what a just a sauce of an environment.
Yeah, and before we get in there, near the end of the interview, we do talk about his cause, his foundation. PB Abbate.
Yeah, you can find it on, if you just like go to LinkedIn, you can hit PB Abbate. You'll see his page there. I think it's PB Abbate. We'll put it in the show notes at the end. But so if you just Google PB Abbate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Did you want to talk a little bit about the foundation?
I find it very. I just want to make sure that we slow down right now because
focus, for sure.
You guys both say PB Abbate so fast.
Okay.
And then you spell it out, and it's still so fast that I just wanted to say it very slowly.
Yes, good call.
PB Abbate. I don't want to speak too much about it because you do a great job going over it in the interview. But PB
Patrol Base, Patrol Base, and it's called Patrol Base Abbate because he has, and again, I don't want to get too far ahead, but he has procured some land out in Montana where he's welcomed anybody who is a service member.
Anyone. Boxes checked. No boxes need to be checked.
And you can go and you can rekindle that sense of camaraderie and sense of purpose again out in this wonderful wilderness out in Montana. So.
Yep, and they are nationalizing, so there are local chapters. So definitely look into that.
Fantastic.
And the website itself even has like a great litany of just resources for people for varying issues or like wherever you have going on. So definitely the website is in itself worth checking out.
Yeah. I mean, here's a guy who truly cares. He gives a dump about people in uniform.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to really slow down and mention that.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
So before we get into that, though, just want to give a peek behind the curtain. We've got an exciting month in November coming up, starting right now with...
Not just cake cutting.
Not just cake cutting. We're barely even going to talk about the birthday, probably.
Semper Fidelis, Marines.
Yeah. Happy birthday, 246.
All right.
Looking good for, 246.
Yeah, we really are. Lean at a 246.
Lean green.
You work out.
If we cover the neck, though. Our age shows on our neck, right?
Yeah, you guys work out.
Turtlenecks.
They're not doing the crunches anymore, but...
It clearly works out.
Anyway, go enjoy a 3-mile run, I guess, Marine Corps. Keep it fit. No, we're barely going to touch on that, but we got some good stuff. We're going to start diving into force design, amphibiosity. We're going to have a chat with the new CEO here at the Marine Corps Association, General Charles Schueman. And, we got Tom Schueman today, and that is a peek at the future.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, or don't.
Well played.
I don't think so. I'm slapping myself right now for how lame I am. We are Major Tom Schueman.
All
right.
Enjoy. So before the interview begins, want to just warn everybody out there that if you have small children, anybody who gets squeamish at graphic depictions of warfare or anybody experiencing symptoms of PTSD, please put on earbuds or headphones or hit pause and have them exit the room because although Tom's account is extremely informative and very authentic, he does not. It's also very candid. So there are graphic depictions of war, and there are accounts of casualties and the actions in combat. So please, again, just hit pause if there anybody within earshot who is sensitive to these issues. All right, thanks. Enjoy the interview. As the official part of the show now commences, I want to welcome Tom Schueman. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to sit down with us and have a little chin wag. I do want to say, just as a brief introduction of you, that you are an Infantry Marine and you are currently attending Naval Command and Staff up in Newport, Rhode Island. If you would, though, if you wouldn't mind, as brief or as long-winded as you want to be, just give us a little bit about your background for our listeners who want to know a little bit more about who you are.
Sure. My favorite way to introduce myself these days is I'm an Infantry Marine and a dad, and that would be my preferred introduction, and that's generally what I do when I don't. I think I am ultimately the least interesting character in this career, and so I like to talk about the stuff that makes this career exciting, which wasn't me. I platoon commander, JTAC with recon, school of infantry, company commander, and taught at the Naval Academy for a couple of years.
That's awesome. And you came to us via Chicago, Illinois, is that right?
Yep. Grew up on the south side of the city. My mom's a Chicago cop, 25 years. The ROTC up on the north side with Northwestern and Loyola's ROTC consortium, commissioned in 2008.
Very nice. Very good. And then as a lieutenant, you actually chronicled a little bit of your experiences as a lieutenant
in an article for the Gazette that's going to hit the shelves in November, titled "Wish for the Impossible." Do you mind telling us a little bit about sort of what the genesis and the impetus behind this article was?
Sure. And what was it? What year did I report to the fleet? July 2009. Reported to 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. I was IOC 4 TACO 9. So yeah, a little bit after July 2009, I reported to 3-5. 4 TACO 9, I think, was a really special class. A lot of Marines who went on to fight and die. A lot of Marines who left some limbs out in a couple different countries, and a lot of Marines who are doing really significant stuff in the Marine Corps right now. I think that class, that IOC class, our instructors are all now the Marine Corps battalion commanders. And it was just, I think, a really legendary instructing crew who had all just got back from Iraq. And yeah, that was like, I never knew I wanted to be a Marine. I didn't really know I wanted to be infantry. But at some point during July 2009, I'm running around with that infantry officer class, and I said, yes, this running with this pack of wolves. I'm in the right place, and I was lucky. 9 of us went to 3-5, 2 went to 1-4, and that was it for the West Coast. Actually, 2 lieutenants didn't come back from Palmfex. They went to 3-4 and deployed within a couple of weeks. But that was the only West Coast guys. Got to 3-5, and they had just returned from the 31st MEU. It was a tough time to be a platoon commander because 3-5 had done Phantom Fury, went back again to Fallujah, and so my junior Marines were all raised by Fallujah vets, and they went to Okinawa, and so they, morale was not high. They got hazed, treated like boots, everything you can kind of think of, with a bunch of guys who just did a bunch of pumps back to back, and then you go on the MEU. So the officers, it wasn't, the officers weren't immune from it. The officers, the senior lieutenants in the battalion were really kind of, I thought, like, jaded, despondent, treated us really crappy, and I think everybody kind of was butthurt that they missed their chance to go to the show with this legendary unit who just and so lots of discipline issues, all kind of, but that all to me changed on a dime. I argue, training, you're always training for combat, but when you have a peacetime deployment on the end of that workup, I think it's significantly more challenging than anything else you'll do in the Marine Corps. And because as soon as you can say Afghanistan, and as soon as you say we're going to Afghanistan and we can't bring everybody, there's a force cap. So you will either get with the program or you'll get off the team.
Yeah.
Infantry Marines generally join because they want to go fight. And so had a great aggressive workup. And I will say our EMV, the Enhancement of a Hobby Viper is what it was called at the time, was really coin-centric. They had done, they call them chubs, and like the chubs clear hold builds were very focused on the build, and you were really winning the moolah and doing a lot of KLE and a lot of cultural training. And I'm reading, 3 cups of tea on the plane over, and we get to Leatherneck, and we're doing our RSO and I, and we get our language cards and our culture cards, and we're getting another culture class. And I remember, I'm pulling my squad leaders together in Leatherneck before we fly into Sangin, and I'm like, okay, guys, like quizzing them on like, how do you say how are you in Pashto? Like still thinking like that, which the only 5th Marines unit that had deployed to Afghanistan was 1-5, and they had a pretty permissive deployment. They were really spread out, and it wasn't very kinetic, and so they talked to us and said, yeah, it's the coin stuff. There was one indication of warning. 3-7's company commander had been medevaced, and he came and talked to us in San Mateo before we flew out. He's now battalion commander in 2-6, Ryan Cohen, one of the most legendary Marines in our Corps, I think. And he'd been medevaced from getting blown up so many times in singing, and he was just started to talk about the Wild West, and I was like, what? But I, and so yeah, we show up, and this is the playbook that did the awakening in Iraq, and this and this is what they think is going to happen in Afghanistan. It's just everyone's going to wake up one day and say, oh, this is a better way to live. And no, that wasn't the case. And on my first patrol, I took out 96 Marines. I'd done no left seat. My first patrol, I was the patrol leader. I had 96 Marines, and I had almost the whole company. And before we were out of the entry control point, we were in L-shaped ambush because we went out in Ranger file. So, that dispersion of 94 Marines going out in Ranger file, I still had like a third of the unit inside the ECP in the front end had located an IED, and around the IED, they were getting shot at from both. And I was like, okay. And, I run up to kind of where contact is, and there was 2 or 3 people from 3-7 who went on that patrol. One was the platoon commander, one was an EOD guy, and I think one sniper maybe. And as I tried to get to the Marines that were pinned down to get a better idea, I go to sprint across an open danger area between 2 cornfields. The corn at the time was 10 feet high. And as I went to run out in between these 2 cornfields, PKM, PDF just hammered down. I dove behind some poppy, a pile of poppy that was, and while I was concealed, I was not covered, And so the poppy was pieces popping. And I turned to my machine gun section leader, and I said, he had his M203. I said, I'm going to suppress this window. You start shooting 40 Mike. And I'm shooting. He pops. He shoots a couple 40 Mike. We were able to get through. And the 3-7 lieutenant turns to me. He's like, okay, Lieutenant Schueman, now that you got your car, how about you make a decision? I was like, my decision was not to die right there. And I'm pretty confident that the car was gonna come. This is the tone of the first 5 minutes. I wasn't too worried that we weren't gonna get the car and staying in. And so the first 100 days, we were in over 100 firefights every single day for the first 100 days. Contact, multiple. You had 14 KIA in the first 2 or 3 weeks. There was a real feeling early in the deployment that, I don't think any of us are going to make it. And so, yeah, I've been preparing for this counterinsurgency, and it was a defense in depth. The enemy had surrounded the patrol bases, built a defense in depth with obstacles and PDFs and everything that you would then build a defense with. And it was us attacking to penetrate this defense and push them back. And so it was a very much like a range 400, attack. It was just
every day.
So yeah, I felt like we were really thought we were. To me, it did not feel like a counterinsurgency. To me, it felt like and you kept hearing this there's no front lines anymore, and there's no front lines in the counterinsurgency. There's no front lines. I'm like, no, there's a forward line of troops. It's the enemy is clearly at this line, and we come and we fight them here. There is a front line here, and this is straight conventional infantry rifle squad tactics is what we got going on out here. And I think people started to accept the fight that we were in initially, at least. The when you get 14 Marines killed in a couple weeks, people they took the gloves off and just said. And so we started to hit back, and we started to learn the AO a little bit. And we started to learn some TTPs, and the advantage slowly shifted. But I think it was I didn't know much about this. I just was looking this up right before we started talking. But I guess there was a WikiLeaks about combat logs in Afghanistan when General Petraeus had. So I think General McChrystal had been relieved. And then Petraeus came in right around when we showed up there in the fall of 2010. And I guess there had been a WikiLeaks, and it talked about and I'm guessing this WikiLeaks had a kind of, I think it was the logs. It was like logbooks of whatever, and it probably showed a lot of civilians getting killed and that kind of stuff. And that's when this updated tactical directive came down. And this updated tactical directive was all about restraint, and this phrase that was getting beaten to us was courageous restraint. And there were like these vignettes about how there was more valor in demonstrating courageous restraint than killing a guy, and it really felt like it put us at a very distinct tactical disadvantage. And I am particularly jaded, I think, and so really late December, the Taliban says, "Oh, we want to reintegrate. We want to become part of Jaroa." The local tribe said, "We want," and everybody on the ground says, like, "There's no way. Like, you're just fighting us yesterday. There's no way." But this was a big moment at the time. Sangin was in all the headlines. You couldn't turn on the nightly news and not see something about Sangin, and everybody wants to be the one who was there for the awakening, and it's shifting the tide in the war. And Secretary Gates is coming out to Sangin at that time. He came out while we were out there, and he's writing all these letters. You read about it in his memoirs, and General Mills is making comments about how this is a war like Iwo Jima, and now here's the opportunity where they say they want to reintegrate to the government of Afghanistan, and so they came down hard with these, emphasizing these directives, and our fires were being denied, and we're Marines and we follow orders, and it was like there's a new way of doing business. And so we went out and we operated in a manner that put us at a significant more risk. And we even got a op pause. We stopped patrolling for a week around Christmas because the Taliban was going to pull up all their IEDs and turn in their weapons. And they didn't want to pull up their IEDs because they didn't want any Marines to, shoot them while they were doing that. But what they did is they turned in like 3 or 4 rusty Lee Enfield rifles, and they relaced the entire AO with IEDs. And what really was happening is they couldn't get the poppy planted because the fighting was so intense that if you were outside in the daytime, were probably going to get shot. And so most of the farmers in Sangin were probably Taliban anyways, but even the ones who weren't were like, I'm not going outside because you and the Marines I'm going to be caught in the middle. And and so the Taliban usually could be very persuasive with the local populace and say, like, you're going to do this or I'm going to kill you. And the local populace would usually, say, okay, I'm going to do what you're saying. But in this case, it was like, no, I'm going to be dead either way. And so I'm not. So this was like one of the few times I think the local populace was like, I'm not going out to plant the poppy because you probably will kill me, but I'll definitely be dead if I'm out on a Tuesday morning because you guys go after it all day, each and every day. And so they really turned strictly to an IED campaign. The firefights dropped off. But on December 28, 2010, this is our first op after the really heavy emphasis on the tactical directive. And one of my machine gunners, we set a cordon around a compound that we had found a couple IDs in the doorway, and one of my machine gunners sees somebody spotting us with a radio. That was the week before. That machine gunner is opening up with a burst, no, on his own initiative, and he turns to the machine gun section leader and says, Sergeant, can I shoot these guys? Does this constitute a hostile intent or act now? And section leader, following orders, listen to my brief, and I listened to somebody else's brief, right? And he says, no, not doesn't constitute, not enough these days. And that guy initiated a remote control IED that killed Heaven to Win. That was the 3rd Marine in my platoon killed. And there were a lot of things that I could have done differently. So ultimately, it's all my responsibility. Anything that happened in my platoon, 19 casualties, and each one of those is my casualty, 19 at 35. And but that guy, that trigger man would be dead, and that IED doesn't go off. And we demonstrated courageous restraint. And we paid for it in Tevin DeWinn's life, who had at the time, a 4-month-old son, Tevin Jr. I'm in now, 2018, I'm in grad school at Georgetown and taking a class, and I had an opportunity to write about a book and just use Bing West's 1 Million Steps. And from that paper, kind of, that's where I started to really kind of, from some of the stuff that Bing argues, and then from my own experience, wishes for the impossible. And I use a lot of kind of Clausewitz in there a little bit. I talk a little bit about Clausewitz, and that's where that comes from.
Yeah, your article, other than just being really well written, really does touch on a lot of the thing I really appreciate about your article is that you reach back to things that we hold as Marines as like sacrosanct, maneuver warfare, Clausewitz, and then you bring it into this modern day context with juxtaposing exactly what it is that you're articulating in your story is that there's a disconnect between the leadership that should have the operational picture, and the young PFC Lance Corporal who is, as you mentioned in your article, like operating at a graduate level of warfare, but yet his ultimate goal is to survive. Like you were saying, like 100 engagements in 100 days, but yet you're asking him to think about things in a strategic context of this courageous restraint. And he's like, I just want to live, if that's okay, because I know I'll be right back at this thing again tomorrow. Sort of like you were mentioning with the farmer, like your threat of death is no longer what you think it is, because if I go out at this time of the day, I will die. Whereas if I tell you no, I may die. So anyways, I guess all of that is to say that, like, in your article, then, what are some of your thoughts then? I obviously, as you mentioned that you started this project in 2018. 3 years later, what are some of your thoughts in hindsight when you juxtapose the idea that, the coin sort of bumper sticker is you kill one insurgent, you've made 2 more. So what are some of your thoughts at how this idea of making it just to the next engagement vice this like big broad strokes idea of winning the hearts and minds, and that this courageous restraint, although in the short term may seem problematic, long term might actually help achieve operational strategic level goals? Is there any synergy there, or is it oil and water?
Yeah, So coming back to the graduate level, you got two special forces generals who had ISAF back to back. And, when you're working with Green Berets, I think you could expect your average enlisted guy to maybe be operating at a graduate level. And while many of my Marines have degrees and are brilliant, I think your average 18-year-old grunt, to expect them, it's not going to happen. Your average 18-year-old grunt is not going to be operating at a graduate level. They're going to do something really well. They're going to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver. Like, that's what they're going to do. And they're not going to be great well builders, and they're not going to be great judges in the district, and they're not going to be great humanitarian assistance projects. They are. You ask this 18-year-old to take on all these roles that the people who have those roles don't even do the roles well, and now you're asking this guy to be a police officer, do tactical site exploitation and this and that, and it's like
civil affairs projects.
Yeah, it's he's a rifleman, he's a machine gunner, and he's really good at it. And but this idea that this graduate whatever, not applicable to the reality of, I think, your average soldier or Marine. The operational disconnect, nothing new, and so you can read any book on Vietnam and find the same operational disconnect occurring. And how do you mitigate some of that operational disconnect? You commanders spending more time, more veracity within reports, less pressure to report things in a specific way that meet. And so whether you read the Pentagon papers or the Afghan papers in the Washington Post, like, all the parallels are there. And it's either people setting an environment where any kind of information that didn't match what they wanted to hear was no thank you, or received hostilely, or completely disregarded. And so it doesn't take a strategic genius to be able to get a pulse for what's happening on the ground. And MCP1 talks about the value of the forward commander and to get a real sense of what's going on in the fight, you got to be there. And this kind of stuff where you got people in Kabul and Leatherneck, it's a different universe. It's a different world. There's a great
the whole green zone thing is just it's a anyways.
There's a great scene in Matterhorn where the Atlantis' platoon is assaulting an objective, and the command is sitting on a thing called Helicopter Hill. And Helicopter Hill, because it's a critique on the battalion commanders who would circle around and tell the guys, go left, go right, do this, and then it's very much a spectator thing going on there at Helicopter Hill, and to the point that when the Marines clear the objective, they can hear everybody clapping, and how Atlantis almost starts to shoot back at Helicopter Hill. He's so pissed off, and that's just one terrain feature away, and they're not even fighting the same war, right? And so it's not that every 4-star general needs to be in a foxhole, but I think we need to really close the gap between people developing the operational planning, the strategic goals, and the tactical realities. And this, I hear you when you talk about the accidental insurgent. As Kilcullen Wright talked about the accidental insurgent. You kill one guy and now his brother's going to fight you. Like, yes, there's a lot of validity to that premise. But the people in Helmand, Afghanistan, whether you killed them or didn't kill them, were going to be insurgents. They don't want to be part of the government of Afghanistan. They don't believe in the government of Afghanistan. And it's not because we killed them or didn't kill them. It's because they're a tribal people who are identified as Pashto, and they have no reason to, or desire, not even reason, desire. Look at Pavlov's hierarchy of needs, security being at the bottom. That's all they care about. And they can barely feed their family, and they just want, and so it's not any of these higher ideals. It's like, can I farm and not starve and not, and that's, and so, you know, I don't think, I understand the idea you kill one, you make two, but there's some conditions, it's just, they're just, I don't think the people in helmet are necessarily bad people, but they were basically deemed bad by association. And so if you're telling me the Taliban are the enemy, these people are Taliban. And it's not going to be me not killing one that is what wins us over here. It's, you know, you can kill your way pretty effectively through an insurgency, I think. And not every insurgency is the same, obviously, but you look at the Philippines, they pretty effectively quelled an insurgency in the Philippines. It wasn't through courageous restraint. That's for damn sure. You know, you look at us fighting the Native Americans. Like, it wasn't that we gave them a lot of good deals. You know, there are effective means of fighting your way through an insurgency to create a security environment where those other things can then become variables or factors to. But until you really eliminate that threat, we don't have the stomach for that. We don't have the stomach for that kind of brutality that it would take. You send 1st Marine Division into Helmand Province, we'll quell it. You know, just turn off the lights, call us in a couple weeks, and that place will be in pretty good order and maybe have conditions set for follow-on hold or build. But it's going to take 1st Marine Division. The Blue Diamond's going to have to deploy there. We're going to have to do what we have to do. And then you come talk to us. And I bet you say, that, okay, like, the population is now ready to consider alternatives, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing about that sort of that, like you said, that kill Cullen mindset is that it is applicable. And I think there's some truth to it, like you mentioned, but you can't apply it too soon. You've got to do, there's a lot of steps that have to occur. Like, even when we start talking about Iraq, where it was successful, Sahel came along, like you said, after they had been getting kicked in the teeth for a bunch of years. And then they were just like, this isn't tenable. We can't sustain this.
Yeah, and it's because the general populace doesn't want to hear stories about clearing. You know, people in 2010 and 11 they want to hear the hold and build stories.
Right.
And so we're in a rush to get to the 3 blocks of war. We're in a rush to get to that hold and build, and it's and the conditions are not set. And not only are the conditions not set because we're not giving them out at the time, you're not giving enough resources, and you are not prepared to be violent enough to achieve the right. Clear. And it's not that we can't do it. We can. It's that you've got to give us the time and the tools, and we can get you to whatever phase you want to get, but no one has any strategic patience to allow the tactical reality to get there. And the last part about that counterinsurgency piece is you know, in Afghanistan we had a lot of carrots, but not much of a stick.
Right.
And so it was like, we could do this civil affairs project, we could do this civil wars project, and civil affairs project, and the British did that a lot all throughout Helmand. And like, the Afghan people are gonna be like, okay, locals are getting paid to build it. There's a new well. Like, you're gonna pave the road. Like, they're going to accept those things. It's not, you know. So I'm going to accept all the carrots, but I'm also not changing my opinion. I'm also not, and so they got to eat all the carrots, have none of the stick, and essentially just wait, because and when there's when the president says we're leaving, and then it's like, okay, well, let's just keep eating these carrots, and they'll leave, and competing in an environment where all you have is a lot of carrots, and the Taliban, conversely, has a lot of stick. You're not going to win the local populace that way, and so I think it was in a lot of ways never going to work. And when I was back the next year as a recon advisor and as a JTAC, the Afghan army was saying, when you guys leave, it will just all go back to being the same. And that was so hard for me to accept because I had spent 2 years there, and what I realized is I wanted this thing more for them than they wanted it for themselves, which has been a great life lesson, to not want something more for someone than they want it for themselves. And so when I think it was 2014, the New York Times article came out about how Sangin had been overrun, and it was heartbreaking, but not shocking. And so, yeah.
Hey, so one of the things that really stood out in your article, other than just the way that you, like I said, linked ideological military history to current employment, was the thing that I think you'd mentioned. It alludes to when you're talking about that forward commander, and you speak really eloquently about your relationship with Lieutenant Robert Kelly and his dad, General Kelly. For those of us who, for either fortunately or unfortunately, will never know the pressures of, having to take the hair of the dog from the president's former chief of staff. Can you go into a little bit about what it was of your relationship was like in those days and months that led up to your deployment?
Sure. So I was Alpha Company, Rob was Bravo Company, but we were in the same platoon at IOC. Let me start off by just saying that Robert Kelly was the best Marine officer I've ever met. He was the standard in all things in all our highest ideals, he was that. And his father was our guest speaker at our graduation at IOC. The thing about Rob is that if you didn't know his dad was a general, he was never going to tell you. He wasn't one of those guys that was ever going to work in it. I never would use it to further his advantage. He was so humble. Honest to God, I'm sure there were Marines in his platoon that didn't know who, and he just, that's how, he just was, and he didn't act any different, any better. And but Rob was kind of like skinny. So me and this other meathead from Kilo Company would kind of like talk crap to him every now and then, and he'd be like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, well, you boots were trying to, do a beer bong in college to impress some, girl. I was clearing Fallujah, and you just basically couldn't. Yeah, he punked us out every time. He had a real dry sense of humor. His platoon, he took a rough platoon, and Lima Company was a rough crew. I was Kilo Company, he was Lima. They were right across the hall, but he had a rough crew, and he ran them quite literally into the ground until they started to have some discipline. And so, I'd be leaving at 1700 and pulling out of the parking lot in San Mateo, and there's a helo pad in San Mateo, and it's straight up. And I'd see Rob Boots and Utes assault pack just running those boys up, and he was hard as nails, but still like a very kind of gentle soul. And he he had recommended that I read Starship Troopers to learn a little bit about NCO relationships. There's a lot of great stuff in NCOs about there, and I carried that with me for a long time, and I ended up teaching that text. So if I'm thinking about who the best junior officer, but best officer I met, period, the best junior officer, if they recommend, and I was at the Naval Academy training, development, mentoring junior officers, so I actually taught Starship Troopers at the Naval Academy in plebe English because of Rob's recommendation. One thing that will always stick out to me is, I was so depressed that 3-5 wasn't going to combat when I checked in. We were going on 31st MEU, and when we got the news right before Christmas, I run across the hall and I'm like, dude, like, we're going, and like, so, and he's like, I would have been okay going out in the MEU. And I was taken aback, and I didn't understand it at the time. I now understand that Rob, as an assaultman in 1-8, clearing through Fallujah, understood that he knew that this was going to mean he was going to be writing letters, and he knew, and so, he was always, even though he was the buck lieutenant, which is the most boot lieutenant, he was always a mentor to me. And if I want to know what was the right way to do something about being a Marine officer, like, I would go to Rob. And it's the night before we deploy, and my buddy Cam West and I was Sledgehammer 1 actual, 3 actual, 1st platoon commander, 3rd platoon commander, go out. You always got after it, and it's the last night before you deploy, so you really get after it. And Rob, the buses weren't coming until the evening, and Rob called that morning and said, hey, come out, have a little barbecue. We got to be at the battalion. And it was like 10 o'clock, and I was still in bed. He's like, my dad's got one of the cabins down at Del Mar on the beach. And so show up, and the first thing the General Kelly does, cracks the PBR, hands it to you, Tom, have a beer. Even just the smell of it, you're going to throw up. It's very bright outside, but you General hands you a beer. You say, thank you, sir. You drink it. And then Kelly's are Irish. They could drink, and before you know it, he's giving you another beer. And it was a beautiful day with an incredible family. And so much of that family's love and goodness was centered around Rob. And that's why on the morning of 9 November, when I was awoken with the news, I immediately just flashed back to the beach and saw those smiles and the warmth and the love, and knew that his wife Heather, his sister Kate, his brother John, and Mr. and Mrs. Kelly, I just knew, and so that was tough. That was a tough morning. And then I was supposed to lead a patrol, and I talked to my squad leader and I said, you think you can take this as just a local kind of patrol? And he said, yeah, it's no problem. I'll take the patrol out. And that squad hit an IED and took a casualty. And as they were trying to bring that casualty back to base, they kept coming under heavy fire, and they called for the QRF. And so I grabbed my kit, and my platoon sergeant ended up being on the same patrol with me, which normally, are in the same squad. It was just first squad was going out. Normally we would be in different squads, and we helped that unit come through and do a passage of lines. They get back safely, and as we're breaking down the return to base, my rear of my patrol comes under very, very heavy fire, multiple fire positions. They get hammered, and they're isolated in a canal. And I'm in the front. My platoon sergeant is just ahead of the team that's trapped, and then my squad leader's in the middle. And I think we went to do a quick platoon huddle. And as the three of us came together, my squad leader stepped on an IED, and I'm unconscious one way, and squad leader gets blown. And so when I regain consciousness, I calm down. I look at my squad leader, and Trey Humphrey was a man I dearly loved and one of my, to this day, dearest friends. I just see two bones sticking out of his right leg, and then his left leg is missing all the skin and muscle, but from his knee to the top of his boot is just a bone. And then I look to the left of him and my platoon sergeant, another man. When I think of my platoon sergeant, I think of the gates of fire. And, forget God, forget country, forget whatever noble thing that you fight here for today. Fight for this and this alone, the man to your left and right, for he is everything, and everything is contained within him. When I think of that, who is that person? He is everything, and everything is contained within him. That was my platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Henley. This man who was closer than any family could ever be, and he's laying there and he's bleeding out the ears. And first thing an amputee is always going to want to know is, are they going to still be able to reproduce? And once you confirm the goods are good to go, immediately Humphrey starts to apologize and say, sir, I'm sorry I stepped off the path, because I can't believe I stepped off the path. And Mike Humphrey, maybe like you don't need to apologize right now. And I was, anytime you have an amputee, it's going to take 3 or 4 guys to kind of just pack the meat. And what was one of the greatest testaments to Humphrey is that by the time I regained my consciousness, his first team leader, Corporal Sean Leahy, had already set security, called in the medevac, and had everything in motion. To me, that is the greatest testament to a leader is how will they perform in his absence. And in an instant, Leahy stepped up, took everything, ran, and just what a testament to Leahy, but really to Humphrey so we get Humphrey bandaged up and get him on a stretcher, and some guys are carrying Henley, and while we're carrying Humphrey up the battlefield. He's a big guy, a little bit probably out of height, weight standards. And he keeps going, I know I'm heavy. Just put me down. Sir, I know I'm heavy. Just you guys take a break. You guys put me down. This is a guy who, in flight, they would have to resuscitate. A guy minutes before his death, quite literally, his last, when you talk about what does it mean to be Semper Fidelis, you talk about the brotherhood. A guy whose thoughts immediately preceding his death was like, I don't want to inconvenience my friends. I know I'm heavy. You guys take a break. No, Humphrey, we're not going to take a break. We're going to get them loaded onto the helicopter, and my company commander's like, you got to go. You're all, and I'm like, the heart and soul of the platoon. Just these two, my first squad leader, my platoon sergeant, like, he's like, I'm not going. And brings me in and to see the IDC, and they're patching me up, and it's like, what happened? And the files had been deleted. I had no idea what had happened, and I could not. And I went to debrief with my platoon, and the IDC is like telling me the whole time, like, you need to fly out the Leatherneck tomorrow. I'm like, not doing it, Doc. And then they okay, 2 weeks light duty at a minimum. Then I'm like, all right, Doc. And so as soon as I get patched up a little bit and leave the BAS, I debrief my platoon, and I said, like, what happened? And so, like, then the files start to re-upload. And I'm like, tomorrow we're going to go do Humphrey's Revenge. And to me, the best remedy that you could do for when you take a punch, best thing you could do when you take a L, when you take a loss, is go out and get a win. And so not allow people to feel sorry for themselves, not allow people to think the enemy is 10 feet tall. And so we went back out the next day and we kicked their ass and really stacked a lot of bodies, all within the rules of engagement, mind you. But it was important for my platoon to get that win right after having such a loss. And the Doc sees me coming in the next day. It was like, what, WTF, sir? Like, sorry, Doc. And so November 9th, very bad day. Started with with losing what I would say is the greatest Marine officer I've ever met. But I know he was a phenomenal brother, son, and husband, just man. And a week later, who do I see coming off the helicopter? But my platoon sergeant, who can't even walk, and he's falling one way off, falling this way, coming off the helicopter. And I'm like, Cesar, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm back, sir. I'm like, you don't appear to be ready to be back. He's like, put me on the next manifest for the next patrol, sir. I'm like, we're going on a 3-day op, Cesar, and we walk in Ranger file because there's IEDs everywhere, and you can't walk in a straight line. He's like, all right, put me on the next manifest for the next patrol, sir. I'm like, I'm not putting you on the next manifest. Sure enough, who's out on the next patrol? Cesar Henley. And here is the testament to our Marines. And we talked about this before this started. What is the best thing about them? What is the thing that the Marine Corps has that no amount of is the Marines, right? And here's this guy who, when he was in Fallujah, he was a squad leader in Phantom Fury. And on the way back to, they were returning to base, and he turned around right before they went into the ECP and said, hey, y'all better stop throwing rocks back there. And went into the patrol base, went back to his hooch, and someone said, hey, Sergeant, your trousers are all red. You've been shot in the ass. This guy's so hard that, he had a one-way ticket out of Phantom Fury, They wanted to send him to Germany. They wanted to send him home. And he said, I'm not leaving, Wolf on Wall Street. I'm not leaving. And he's back with his boys 2 weeks after getting shot in Fallujah, when he has a golden ticket out of there, and so he's in the deadliest, most lethal battle in Iraq, and now he finds himself in the deadliest and most lethal battle in Afghanistan, and he's again got a one-way ticket. He says, I'm not leaving my boys. And when he came back a week later, my platoon started calling him Black Jesus because they couldn't believe that he'd already, been resurrected. And it's just, I actually just got to promote him to first sergeant a couple years ago, and he's still in. And so General Kelly ended up coming out. He was assistant to the Secretary of Defense. I don't know, Zach Billett, but he worked for Secretary Gates at the time, and they both came out. So I got to see them out in country. He got to meet the Marines and the corpsmen who had been there with Rob. And, of course, Rob was walking point, and Rob was doing the hard things. And when other people were jumping over a canal, Rob was walking through the canal. And so right up to the end, there's a picture of Rob. There's a picture of Rob as an officer with the small rockets on his back, still as an officer, just everything about him, leading by example and never doing anything that his Marines would do. And I talked a little bit about, I think I closed the article with some stuff from General Kelly, and he says, like, well, what does it all mean? And it's, it's not up to us, the living, those who sacrificed their life, they voted, and it's their vote that matters. They said this thing matters. I'm going to fight and die, and to me, that's all the testament that you need. And he's talking about how they're not victims. Warriors can never be victims because they died leaning into the fire next to their corpsmen and their Marines who they loved, and these men were not victims. And you can listen to or read his 6 Seconds to Live speech with Yale and Herder about that, or you can listen to any one of his talks, and he talks about what service means and who are these men and women that make up our Corps, and just how they're just the salt of the earth, and they're the people at your grocery store. They're not, we say, oh, there's some superhero. No, they're just the people who decided to step up when someone needed that, when the nation needed that. That's who they are. They're your average citizen who said, I'm going to step up. So I still I had my midshipman read a knock at the door, and I run a book club, and I had us read the knock at the door, which Rob's wife was a co-author with Looney and Mannion, and so I had all the mids. I had the mids on at Quantico, and we all jumped on a call with all of them to talk about that knock at the door. And General Kelly jumped in on my book club call last week. We had Stephen Pressfield join us for my book club, and so yeah, I mean, just a family who, they're a no bullshit family, and when you look at a record of service, I think they stand in the annals of great American families.
Yeah, absolutely. So what then would like, not just for our listeners, but I mean, just for the American people to, whose experience of Afghanistan is limited to just political talking points, what would you like for them to know about what you, Rob, and thousands of others understand about Afghanistan and the Afghan people?
Yeah. Was it a waste? No, it wasn't a waste, because it's the best days of my life. It's the worst days of my life. It's the refinement of my character. It's how I find out who I am as a man. And I meet Zach, my interpreter, who ends up becoming one of my best friends. And those bonds that were forged under fire are some of the strongest you ever make. And so, and for a moment, people had improved quality of life. For a moment, girls had more access and more rights. And to me, that's not, it's not a waste. Was there significant amounts of waste? Well, yes. I mean, you could look at $89 billion of whatever, and you could look at, so you could look at, like, one of the most enduring characteristics of war is waste. You can read Marlantes, you could read Webb, you could read O'Brien, and they're going to just keep drilling the waste of war. But was the and it's really not, my thing is, it's not up to the warrior. The warrior goes where they're told. The warrior answers a call. It's called orders. And so the warrior follows orders. And so I did something that I think was really meaningful. Even it didn't win the war, but in a microcosm, what we did meant something. Those 25 killed in action, Kevin Nguyen, Benagwa, Abbate, Jason Pito, Robert Kelly, that their sacrifice definitely means something. And what you have to ask is you have to ask from a societal standpoint, well, was it worth it? You who allowed it, permitted it, whatever, you are the ones that have to reconcile how you want to feel about it. I am, in my profession, in the warrior profession, I'm going to go where I'm sent, and I'm going to do the best I can with what I have, and I'm going to find a way to win my own battle. My Marines are going to find a way to win the battle you asked us to fight. But next time you want to start a war, you have to ask yourself if you have the stomach for it. And you have to ask yourself the basic principles of, what is it that you hope to achieve? And do we have the ways, means, and ends to achieve that? And if you can't clearly articulate that, then maybe you don't start the war. Because when these young men are dead, they're dead forever. And while we carry their legacy, they live through the legacy that by us saying their names, they're here and they're not forgotten. This potential of the 13, there was real human potential there, and in an instant, it was wiped off the earth. And so you gotta societally, you gotta ask yourself, is this worth it? And it's okay if the conditions change. You have to be able to change and adapt with the war, and not keep wishing for the war. Fight the war you have, not the war that you're wishing for. And too often, we fight the war that we wish we have, this imaginary war that is never actually the real war that we're fighting. And it's not impossible to know what the real war is. And the real war is the point man. Ask the point man. And you can read accounts about the point man from, again, Marlantes and Matterhorn or Webb. His point man is Catman. Catman to me is the most iconic, point man in literature. You want to know what's going on, you go find the point man. And it doesn't have to be a mystery. And because they're living it. They're living the reality of that war. And those are my thoughts on Afghanistan.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's really powerful to hear your accounts of things. And yeah, your perspective obviously is very, very welcome, especially in this forum. Before we cut out though, man, I know, and thank you again for taking as much time in the evening to sit down with me on this. But last thing I want to talk about is your current project. I know obviously as a Naval Academy instructor and now a Naval Post or Naval War College student. Infantryman, you got a lot on your plate, but you've got something very important on your plate as well. You mind talking a little bit about that, about PB Abbate?
Sure. Matt Abbate, Navy Cross recipient, killed in action December 2nd, 2010. If Robert Kelly was the best Marine officer I've ever met, Matt Abbate is the greatest warrior I've ever met. And, I fought alongside a lot of really badass guys, some real tough dudes. There was all of us, and then somewhere a mile above us was Matt Abbate. He was really in a class of his own when it came to just his absolute tactical, physical prowess. Should be right there with Dan Daly, John Basilone when we talk about, legendary Marines in our history. And so he's someone I've always wanted, part of my life mission is honoring the fallen. And he's someone I've always wanted to make sure that I honor his legacy. And so in April of 2020, I just put my daughter to bed, and I received a call that late that Corporal Justin McLeod had killed himself. And Corporal Justin McLeod wasn't the first, Marine suicide that I had dealt with, but McLeod was particularly tough because before we deployed, he was up against his EAS. He had D1 scholarships and in high school to go play college ball, and he enlisted went with 3-5 to Fallujah, went on that 31st MEU, and by the time he did the entire workup with us, but he had just had a son, Desmond, and I said, I was going to extend, but I think I'm going to EAS, and I said, man, we need you. You're a designated marksman. You're my land nav guy. But ultimately, talk to your wife and come back and let me know. And he came back a couple of days later and said, what, sir, you're my family too. About 3 months later, my engineer would step on a pressure plate and McLeod was over the charge. And as I came to the front of the patrol, one of my Marines handed me McLeod's fingers, and I got to McLeod and he was already basically dead and no pulse. And And I noticed, very high amputee, missing 2 legs, missing part of his arm. I knew he wasn't going to need those fingers anymore. I'd awkwardly placed in my cargo pocket. And I'll tell you what, the Marine Corps does a really phenomenal job of preparing you for combat. I am a big believer in the infantry officers course, in our pre-deployment training. There were not any situations that I came across that I didn't feel prepared to fight my way through. Technically, I always felt competent in whatever I was, but there were a couple scenarios, and this was one of them, where no amount of training can really prepare you. And as I watch a dying Marine in front of me, how can I help him find the way and the will to live? And I am giving him a sternum rub, and I am telling him, hey, McLeod, and you're doing this when you know the Marines are looking at you, and all you want to do is cry at the loss of someone you love, one of your sons. And I said, you got to make it back, because you said you were going to, teach Desmond how to play baseball, and you said you were going to be his little league coach. And now I'm thinking this guy doesn't have an arm, doesn't have any legs. And but the will to live is a powerful thing, and it took. And Corporal McLeod has been fighting the battle, saying, for over a decade, and hundreds of surgeries, and he finally lost that battle. And I was actually just a couple of weeks ago, I gave the eulogy at his memorial ceremony, because it was postponed because of COVID. I flew out to St. Louis. And then within 30 days, one of the sergeants from when I was a company commander, and another one of the junior Marines from when I was a company commander, committed suicide. And, I'm just not a guy who I just feel like as a leader, if there's a problem, you should deal with it. And I just said, what is going on? And as I started to read through all the VA suicide reports, I found that, over a decade of these reports, the leading proximal cause of veteran suicide were feelings of disconnectedness and isolation. I said, okay. And then what I wasn't anticipating that I found is that there was no clear correlation between combat and suicide, and that almost twice as many non-combat veterans were killing themselves as combat veterans. I said, okay. So if we know Marines who feel the disconnectedness and isolation are the ones who are killing themselves, and we know it's not just combat Marines. Conversely, it's actually twice as many non-combat. So what is out there? What resources are out there that are connecting Marines, putting them back in community? Because as an officer, right, I've constantly got to fight against the idea of reinventing the wheel. I've got to say, if there's something already out there doing this, and what I found is about 99% of the resources are allocated to about 1% of the population. That 1% of the population are combat wounded and our special forces. And to me, it made so much sense that your main effort, are the people who sacrifice the most, special forces and the people who put their limbs out there, So of course that's where you start, but it really felt like we started and stopped there. And I said, we've got to, I think there's more room, there's got to be, I think we can continue, to add some resources here. And so as I started to look through all these different resources that were out there, and everything said, oh, check this box. If you want our resource, you got to check this box. You got to be disabled enough. You got to had gone to this combat. You had to be part of the special SEAL team. You had to have, and I'm a combat wounded guy. I can probably check a lot of boxes. But what if I don't want to so narrowly define myself as someone with? What if I have PTS? But what if I don't want to just put myself in what if I just want to say, I'm Tom, I served, and I think communities, and I would like to be part of this community, And so everything felt so exclusionary. And I said, what if we can build a community where service is the only requirement? What if I could build this community where if you raise your right hand, you're in? no dues, no fees, no weird handshakes. No, like your service is your ticket to entry. And when we think about all these non-combat veterans killing themselves, to me, it makes perfect sense. When I was at Georgetown, I spent a lot of time studying moral injury, and I read a lot of Jonathan Shea, Achilles in Vietnam, and of course I read Tribe, and everyone's read Tribe at this point. And the idea that if you're in a submarine, or you're an air crew on a C-17, or if you're in a motor T section, all those jobs are important jobs, and you are in a very tight crew. You're in a submarine for 90 days at a time. You're working on the 7 tons. You're on the aircraft turning wrenches. And what do we want? We want a task. We want that purpose. We want the tribe, and we want the purpose. And I'm telling you, hey, it's important that C-17s fly. Hopefully I can convince you, why it's important that nuclear submarines are somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. And so it's okay, I do have something purposeful. I am part of this thing that's purposeful. And I've been issued a tribe, like your squad, your division, and so people who everyone to the left and right of you had said, I'm actually willing to die for you. That's a pretty intense tribe that we put around you. And so then you get out, and all the data says is that the most vulnerable year is that first year transition. And you get out and you take off, and it's an identity crisis because you don't have a name tape, and you don't have a rank, and you don't have that issue, that you don't have that. Here's your mission statement. The mission of the Marine Rifle Squad is locate, close. You don't have that mission statement. You don't have. You were in first fire team, first squad, and now and you were a machine gunner. And wow, that's a cool job. And so I said, look, I'm gonna go. I went and got 350 acres out in Montana because I wanted to be outside, because I'm a believer in the outdoors, and I wanted veterans to have. And I wanted to be out west in the mountains because I think this is where good stuff happens. And I wanted to be a physical space that there was real terra firma, dirt, that every veteran, active duty veteran, reservist, National Guard, says, there's a place for me, and I belong there. And it's not conceptual or a theoretical place. It's a no shit 350 acre retreat ranch that you belong at. And when I would tell this to people initially, they'd be like, me? Well, I was just, and so this is what I've been fighting, this I was just narrative. I was just a, and I said, no, your service matters. And we've been deluded with this social media hierarchy to think that if you didn't kill Osama bin Laden, if you didn't have a suppressor on your weapon and 4 nods, that your service really didn't. And I want to say, hey, IPAC Marine, Air Force, turbine engine wrench turner, all of it matters. And so yes, you actually rate to be at the and so we really, we built a very large tent and put a big table in there and said, you got a seat at this table. And I wanted to make it accessibility and inclusivity, right? We're kind of really the driving goals here. And so I didn't make it, I'm a literature guy, and I'm a grunt. So I like walking, hiking, and I like books, but I didn't want to make it just and so I said, look, we're going to do an interest-based concept. And if you're into gardening, if you're into yoga, if you're into hunting, if you're into jiu-jitsu, if you're into weightlifting, you name it. If you're into it and you want to lead the club, we'll bring you out, and you can do that thing here. And so any kind of excuse that you might have, oh, that sounds cool, but I'm not a big literature guy. I know they got a book club, but I'm not. It's okay, well, what kind of guy are you? What kind of gal are you? Okay, we got that club actually, or we don't, but you want to lead it, and you can go do it in Montana, and you can do it for free, And so because we don't want anybody to have any reason where they feel excluded, we do it free of charge. So you're going to do the thing that you love. We're flying you out. We're picking you up. We're feeding you, and you're going out there for 3 days out in Montana to do the thing that. And so we ran several retreats this summer, hunting, book fight, strength clubs. We just had a music club out there a couple weekends ago. And I've been out there for these retreats, and the testimonials, it's people saying like, this changed my life. This was the most significant weekend in my life. This saved my life. And so it's not what's happening out there. Our methodology with what we do in our physical retreats it's working. But I wanted it to be enduring and sustainable. And I'm also a narrative guy, again, coming back to literature piece, and this too much of this narrative around the veteran as victim is that veterans are damaged, broken, entitled. And I say, that's not the veterans that I know. We're men and women of character and men and women of service. And so we started these local chapters we've got 50 of them all across the country. And in any city, if you look up Patrol Base Abbate, Chicago, Boston, San Diego, Portland, you name it, you name the city, we've got a Patrol Base Abbate chapter there. And it's so that we can't bring everybody out every weekend to the patrol base, but we can give you that tribe locally at any time. And it's predicated on a social component and a service component, because I believe what we need is we need to continue to feel like we're sacrificing and serving. And so, again, to not reinvent the wheel, I said each of these local chapters is going to find a local partner who is trusted in the community. So where's the soup kitchen in the community? Where's the our San Diego chapter does Recycle for Veterans. There's an organization out there that picks up the beach in Oceanside, And so again, what we do is we find them and we say, hey, we're going to be the largest veteran service organization in the country because we're the most inclusive, because there's over 17 million veterans and they're all eligible. And there's almost, a million on active duty and they're all eligible, and National Guard and the reserves. And so we're going to bring the manpower. We want to serve. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go pick up trash on the beach. And we're going to say, look, not only are veterans not looking for handouts, we're people of continued service. And then we're going to go to Pizza Port and grab a slice of pizza after, And so you've got that tribe, you've got that purpose again. And the last thing about what we're doing with this is we have such a strong initiative to get active duty folks into Patrol Base Abbate. Because if we know that first year transition is the most vulnerable year, we got to get left of bang.
Mm-hmm.
We got to be proactive, preemptive, and everything out there is so reactive. Oh, you just tried to kill yourself. Oh, everything is like after the bad thing happened. Now you could have access to our resource. And what we're saying is, whether you're fit for full duty, light duty, wherever you're at, and your mental health, whatever, we want you while you're on active duty, and so that we've got your six, we've got your flank covered, so that when you start that transition, which everybody's going to transition, 40 years or 40 years, 40 years or 40 years, right? You've got someone that says like, hey, I actually just transitioned last month. Here's what I just transitioned 4 years ago. Here, and we've got everybody in all walks of that transition phase that can kind of come alongside you and mitigate that period of risk. And so, any given weekend all around this country, you've got local chapters of Patrol Base Abbate meeting. And then all summer, we're running retreats out in Montana. And if you are active duty, a veteran, National Guard, reservist, and you've served, we want you in our tribe. And that's what we got going on with Patrol Base Abbate.
Man, that is amazing. And I love everything you had to say about the inclusivity part. One of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast is that whole idea of like taking back control of the narrative and giving agency back to the storyteller. And like you said, the popular understanding of a service member is he was either in special forces, he was a CG of some task force that won some battle or some war, has their name attested to some major campaign, and that the guy who stood post or dude who repaired the T-Rat machine, or like you said, the 7-ton driver, their stories don't matter. It's only the guys. And obviously the bookshelves are just filled with those things that bring truth, make that seem like that's the truth of veterans, is that you're either special forces or Medal of Honor winner, and then everybody else. So anyways, Really love everything that you got going on. How can people find out more about this, about PB Abbate?
Yep. So PB, Papa Bravo, Abbate.org. Abbate has 2 B's in it, ABBATE, pbabbate.org. And it's simple. It's you if you are any of those things, sign up, join the club that you're into, put your zip code in, and what's going to happen is I'm big on reception integration. The Fight Club, if you're into jiu-jitsu, the Fight Club captain's going to say, hey, welcome to the Fight Club. And then if you're in Chicago Club captain's going to say, hey, welcome to Chicago. Happy to have you in. And then we're also really active on Instagram. So just at PB Abbate on Instagram. So those would be the 2 places to find us.
That's awesome, man. And I mean, as a literature guy, there's so much more that I wanted to talk to you about. But I don't want to monopolize your time because I could seriously sit here all night and talk to you, man. But I really appreciate your time. I really would love to get you back on the show. Maybe we talk about some literature, talk about your professional development. I'm really fascinated too with your education track because it seemed like between Georgetown, Naval Academy, Rhode Island, and then, I definitely want to keep in touch and follow your path too because you've got a lot going on. But man, thank you so much for taking your time. And just really powerful stuff, man. And I know I've got a lot to think about. I really appreciate your time. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. Stay in the fight and keep attacking. Thanks.
Hey, Ra. All right, man. Thanks. Have a good night.
Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. I am Nick Wilson. That is Major Vic Rubel, U.S. Marine Corps retired. We have also heard the voices of or contributions from William Truding or Nancy Lichman, editors of Gazette and Leatherneck magazines, respectively. Opinions expressed in Scuttlebutt are just that, opinions, and do not represent any official stance of the MCA.